On today's episode, we talk about how it started, how it ended, with the wide receivers coming right up.
I wake up, flex, thumb down now, check, no drip this, tell him run it up, no sleep, no rest, might crash, might wreck, but first.
And what is up, everyone? Welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football Podcast for Monday, May 3rd, 2021. And I'm Chip, I'm your host. Thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share our podcast, you can find us over on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please do me a favor, hit subscribe, support the show, so you don't miss any more episodes. And on today's episode, we're going to go back to the series, talking about how it started, how it ended for the wide receiver position. But you know, we just got finished with the draft. I did my reaction video last week on the first round. So if you want to check that out, I'll leave that in the description. But yeah, I mean, the draft for me was a huge success. I think based on where we're at last year compared to this year, I think it was awesome to see Cleveland host the draft and see how it looked back to normal, you know, to what we feel like normal is. I mean, we saw the players that were supposed to be drafted in the first round be there. They're with their families. You saw Roger Goodell get hugs from, like, the traditional hugs from the players being drafted. It was just good to see fans there, see the players there, and just feel like things are starting to come back, you know, back into some normalcy with the NFL. And I know they already stated that they look forward to having full, you know, capacity, be at full capacity with NFL in the stadiums this year. So it was good to see that type of stuff take place, and it looks like it's gonna be in Las Vegas next year. So that'll be a cool draft to go to, and hopefully, you know, this is a stepping stone in the right direction on trying to get things back in order. But hope that your team, whatever team you choose to root for, I hope that you're able to find some positives from the draft. I know there were some teams out there who had barely any draft picks, so maybe you don't feel like your team gotten better. But hopefully, with the teams that got, like, the Trevor Lawrence and like the Jets and the Jags, you know, hopefully you're a fan of those teams, that you have some hope, especially with the Niners with Trey Lance being drafted there, and then, you know, Justin Fields going to the Chicago Bears. Like, I hope that it's you know, good for your teams going forward. There's some excitement there. It's not going to happen right off the bat, but hopefully, you know, these players that get drafted in the first round are players that can be a franchise, make a difference in the franchise, and be stars. But we all know that that's very high, you know, high risk, high reward when you take quarterbacks and certain players in the first round. We always see better players coming from the later rounds, but we always see a little bit more of the first round bust happen, unfortunately. But you never know. You know, hopefully we get all the quarterbacks that got drafted will be players that we talk about for years to come. But history shows us that doesn't happen, but we'll see. But with that being the case, let's go ahead and talk about some of the news that took place over the weekend and on Monday. And I'm going to start off with this story. You know, Aaron Rodgers continues to be unhappy with what's going on with Green Bay, especially what happened today. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network reported that the Packers released wide receiver Jake Kumaro, I think that's how you pronounce his name, but he was apparently being praised by Aaron Rodgers over the weekend, and then less than 24 hours later, the Packers released him. So I just feel like the Packers are just now trolling Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if there was some other report saying that there's a small percentage chance that he's going to play for the Packers again, that he could sit out the whole season. Like, there's so many rumors coming from every different direction. We have no idea what are, you know, good sources and good people to kind of that are close to the situation that will give us the right information. But I don't know what's going on with Green Bay. I have no idea why they decide to continue to kind of troll him. But Aaron Rodgers seems to be done in Green Bay, and it'll be interesting to kind of see if there's any trades happen. I mean, there was no major trades in the draft this past weekend. No major players got drafted, or, you know, no Julio Jones or Aaron Rodgers or Jimmy Garoppolo. None of those players got traded away. So for me, who knows exactly how this is going to play out when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, if he's actually going to get traded, or he's going to finally figure out how to you know, coexist with the GM and the head coach of the Green Bay Packers. But very interesting story still in Green Bay. And then going on to some of the fifth-year options here. The Bills exercised Josh Allen's fifth-year option, so he's going to be back for 2022. Obviously, this was a given. He's going to get a contract extension, hopefully get something done quickly, so they don't let him hit free agency. And then Calvin Ridley of the Falcons, they exercised his fifth year option, which obviously that was another pretty obvious choice. But the Falcons did not exercise the fifth year option for Hayden Hurst. Now that they had drafted Kyle Pitts, Hayden Hurst is a guy that he could get traded or he could find some work somewhere else. But Hayden Hurst is still a decent tight end. I think that at the right opportunity he can still be a very effective tight end. And then the Seahawks declined running back Rashad Penny's fifth year option. I mean, this is a given. He's been derailed with a lot of injuries, unable to stay on the field. So could be a good possibility where he could come back this year, play well, and maybe work himself into a new contract, or if not with the Seahawks, with somebody else. But he has to stay healthy. That's been his issue since he's been in the NFL. So hopefully that will happen for Rashad Penny. And then the Lions general manager had spoken briefly about what their plans were in the draft. So it has regards of Jared Goff, and it said that if there was a quarterback at the number 7 position that they had rated higher than the offensive tackle they have taken, they would have drafted a quarterback. So it makes me think that Jared Goff is not in the Detroit Lions' long-term plans. Looks like if they had a chance to upgrade the position, they were going to. They did not. So Jared Goff at least is safe for this season. But something to think about where Jared Goff may be one of those guys where if he doesn't perform, they'll easily replace him, and then he'll be left, trying to find work somewhere else. But very interesting comment from the Lions general manager. And then lastly, back to the Seattle Seahawks. It looks like DK Metcalf has been wanting to get into the Olympics. So it looks like he's trying to compete in the USATF Golden Games at the 100-meter dash on Sunday. So I guess it's very interesting to me when players decide to go off and do other things, like, not saying he's not going to leave the NFL, but from an injury standpoint, it makes me concerned when other players, star players, decide to go and do something else during the offseason. And there's a lot of players out there that have clauses in their contracts that they're not allowed to play basketball or any other, recreational activities that could, hinder with the injury or whatnot. But very interesting. But DK Metcalf, I mean, he's a fast player. If he can do that, great for him. But it's just something that always concerns me as a front office, personnel in a team, that could this possibly cause an injury that could now go into the season, that now DK Metcalf can't be available for the Seahawks. So always a little concerning, but it's good that the Seahawks are allowing him to do that, to allow him to be able to venture out on different things that he's passionate about. But that is all the news for Monday. And then so now we're going to talk about the wide receiver position, on how it started and how it ended, because I feel like this is always a series to do based on how players finish, based on how you draft them. So going into that, I'm going to list the players that were drafted in the top 12. So I always do the what's warranted as a wide receiver 1 is 1 through 12, because most leagues play in a 12-team league. So based on average draft position, this is kind of what this is what we saw last year. So obviously last year, when it comes to the wide receiver position, Michael Thomas was the number 1 wide receiver taken off the board last year. Then you had Devontae Adams, Julio Jones at 3, Tyreek Hill at 4, DeAndre Hopkins at 5, Chris Godwin at 6. You had Kenny Galladay at 7, Mike Evans at 8. You had Adam Thielen at 9, DJ Moore at 10, Odell Beckham at 11, and then you had Allen Robinson at 12. And so you look at that and you're like, man, that seems pretty crazy, right? Like, when I looked at this list, I looked at the couple names, and I looked at Kenny Galladay obviously being drafted as a top 10 wide receiver last year, which I didn't think that was really warranted. And I got some hate for that last year. And then DJ Moore. I never understood the hype over DJ Moore. DJ Moore was the 10th overall wide receiver taken last year. I know he's talented, and this is based on PPR, so I know he's talented, but I just never understood why DJ Moore was getting drafted before OBJ, Allen Robinson, all these guys that get more targets and whatnot. So that was an interesting thing for me to see. Obviously, I mean, Juju was drafted. He was drafted 13th, and then we saw what he did. He didn't do much last year. He had a really bad season. So it's always interesting in hindsight to look at what players were where players were drafted at last year compared to what they're at, and looking at how they finished. Because you're going to see, I'm going to go ahead and tell you who the top 12 were last year based on PPR finishes, and drastically different. You're going to see you hear some of the same names, but there's a lot of players that you never expected to be in this list, and they were. But I still think, like, this is going to happen every single season. We're always going to find guys that we draft really high that don't make the cut, who we consider as a wide receiver one, and you'll see some where those values come from. But to demonstrate kind of how they finished. So Davante Adams, he was the number one wide receiver last year. He finished with 358.4 PPR points. And then Tyreek Hill was second. Stephon Diggs was 3. DeAndre Hopkins was 4. Calvin Ridley was 5. Justin Jefferson was 6. DK Metcalf was 7th. Tyler Lockett was 8th. Allen Robinson was 9th. And then Adam Thielen was 10th. Mike Evans was 11th. And then you had Robert Woods and Keenan Allen both finished the same amount of points, and they both were 12. So we got a baker's dozen here. I added a 13th player because they both finished. There's 2 players that finished up with the top 12. So what's intriguing about this list, right, is that we see Stephon Diggs. He was the guy that was drafted. Where is he at? 27th last year. So Stephon Diggs was the 27th wide receiver off the board last year, and he finished in the top 5. That's crazy to me because Stephon Diggs seems to not get the love that he deserves. And I think finally, based on what he did in Buffalo, he had 166 targets and 127 receptions. So, like, obviously he is Josh Allen's go-to guy. And he played all 16 games, which is something that Stephon Diggs hasn't done in a lot of his career. So the fact that he was there doing that was great. But talk about value, right? Drafting Davante Adams and Tyreek Hill, you expect them to finish every year in the top 5 and kind of where their ADP was. And that's what they did, right? But Stephon Diggs being drafted 27th overall, being the number 3 wide receiver, that's huge value, whoever drafted Stephon Diggs last year. And you look at Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley was a guy that I felt like was going to be the number 1 wide receiver for the Falcons. I felt like because of the way Julio Jones is getting up there in age, how he is really hard to maintain his health, I feel like Calvin Ridley finally was going to be that guy that would take over the wide receiver 1 position, and I feel like he has. Last year he was the 14th overall wide receiver drafted, and he finished up in the top 5. So that's value there, right? That you look at what you got value-wise, and that was a perfect, draft day value. This one here next is Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson is finished as the wide receiver 6 last year in PPR leagues. And this guy was drafted 51st overall. Like, this was a guy that I know in my leagues that I'm in, he was drafted, dropped, and then picked up once he started, doing well during the season. And it's crazy to look at what Justin Jefferson did as a rookie and be in the position of being in the top 5, right? So, or a top 10. So it's one of those things where we don't see that very often because we have this unfortunate, situation where rookie wide receivers tend to not do as well in the rookie season. There's only maybe 1 or 2 that will flash, but it's very unheard of to not really unheard of, but it's really rare for a player that's a rookie to see in the a wide receiver class that all of them do well. I mean, it was back in 2014. We had 3 wide receivers. We had OBJ. He finished as the 7th receiver overall. Then you had Mike Evans at 13, and you had DeAndre Hopkins at 14. So that was the year where we had 3 wide receivers that are rookies finish as a wide receiver 1 or fringe wide receiver 1. So we didn't have that last year. We just had 1, Justin Jefferson. But we had CeeDee Lamb. He was doing pretty well last year. But unfortunately, when Dak Prescott went out, he was really kind of inconsistent along with Andy Dalton. You look at what happened with Chase Claypool. He had a couple good games, but then down the stretch, he was unreliable. You had T. Higgins. T. Higgins was doing pretty well, pretty consistent until Joe Burrow went down. So, it's one of those things where the situation has to be completely just, favorable for that wide receiver. And in Minnesota, he pretty much took the Stephon Diggs, role. They got rid of Stephon Diggs. He went to Buffalo. They drafted Justin Jefferson to pair up with Adam Thielen, and it ended up working out. So I think this was a good value pick. I think DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett finishing back-to-back is pretty interesting to me. I feel like DK Metcalf was going to be the guy who's going to be the number 1 wide receiver. And based on this, I mean, the targets were pretty similar. You had DK Metcalf with 129 targets. Tyler Lockett had 132. The difference was that Tyler Lockett had 100 receptions and to DK Metcalf's 83. They both had 10 touchdowns. It's just DK Metcalf had, about 250 more yards in him. So interesting to see teammates back to back on this list. And then Allen Robinson still continues to get hit. He had 151 targets last year. He definitely was a guy that has not played with a good quarterback his whole career. He had to deal with Blake Bortles. Then you had Mitchell Trubisky. Then you had Nick Foles. Hopefully with Justin Fields, this changes the way Allen Robinson is viewed. Hopefully that they'll get some chemistry there where they can be a good 1-2 tandem. But Allen Robinson continues to be a top 10 or top 12 wide receiver just because the volume is there. And then Adam Thielen, he's pretty consistent. For the last few years, if he's not injured, he's pretty good on the numbers that he puts up. And Mike Evans, Chris Godwin was drafted ahead of Mike Evans last year, but then Mike Evans, the one who had finished the season, played all 16 games. Chris Godwin was hurt; he broke his finger. He was unable to finish with 16 games. But Mike Evans was the guy that helped you win a championship. If you had Mike Evans, he wasn't very good throughout the whole entire season, but during that time, he could have won you your fantasy league based on the weeks that he had in the fantasy playoffs. And then Robert Woods and Keenan Allen, they both finished in the top 12 with the same PPR points. And Robert Woods, this is a guy that I know he's good. I know that he's a high volume guy. He gets, he had 129 targets last year, but he's a guy that he's not a sexy name, but he is a contributor. He's a guy that's not going to, he's going to be consistent for you. He's not going to lose you a week, but he's not going to win you a week type of situation. But now that has Matthew Stafford, there could be a chance that Robert Woods has a better year than this year. But same with Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, unfortunately, has not. He only played 14 games last year, so he was dealing with a lot of injuries. He was unstoppable for weeks at a time, but then injuries derailed his season, so he was not able to he would have been higher on this list if he was able to play 2 more games. But Keenan Allen continues to be another guy who gets just overlooked. He's just a guy that he's very talented, and he's maybe because he plays for the Chargers that he just doesn't get a lot of love. Maybe the reason why Stephon Diggs didn't get a lot of love in Buffalo because he was going to they say inconsistent thrower in Josh Allen, but they both finished very well in fantasy, both Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. So very, very interesting when you compare what the ADP was compared to who finished in the top 12. And based on that, based on the consistency, like I always do this with all the episodes, is that you look at how these wide receivers finished, like how many times, how consistent were they? And based on the list that finished in the top 12, like this is how many times these wide receivers finished as a wide receiver 1 through the season. And you look at Davante Adams, he had 8 weeks that he was wide receiver 1. He only played 14 games, so he could have had more if he had played a full season. He had Tyreek Hill with 7. Obviously, his biggest game came against Tampa Bay. And then Stephon Diggs, he had 5 weeks where he was a wide receiver 1. He had a massive end of the season, which helped his stats. DeAndre Hopkins, this was an interesting one to me. DeAndre Hopkins he had 8 weeks that he was a wide receiver 1. But I feel like there wasn't any weeks I felt like he won you a week. I felt like he's been consistent, but it just seems like he didn't have that DeAndre Hopkins type season where he took over games. But he was consistent pretty much the whole entire season. Then you had Calvin Ridley that had 6 weeks where he was a wide receiver 1, but there were weeks out there where he got goose egged, right? That he didn't have any catches, and that happens. But he was a guy who had 6 weeks there. Then you had Justin Jefferson had 5 weeks as a wide receiver 1. DK Metcalf had 5. Tyler Lockett had 4. Allen Robinson had 5. Adam Thielen had 7. Another guy I looked at where he had 7 weeks as a wide receiver 1, but never felt like he did anything that won you a week. And that was just my own perspective. I could be missing something here, but Adam Thielen was 4 of the 13 guys listed that had more than 7 or more weeks as a wide receiver 1. Then Mike Evans had 4, Robert Woods had 4, and then Keenan Allen had 5. And based on the top 5 wide receivers, I just felt like I just don't. If you own these players, if there's somebody that owns some of these players, leave a comment below on the YouTube channel if this is something that I may be missing. But maybe I know that obviously if you had Davante Adams, he had monster games. Tyreek Hill had monster games. Stephon Diggs. I don't remember about DeAndre Hopkins. Calvin Ridley definitely took a step forward in the right direction with his fantasy status. But Justin Jefferson is going to be another guy that's going to be interesting, player going forward for this year because he's a guy that just flourished as a rookie, and hopefully he can build off his rookie season and be one of those top wide receivers again this year. And that's the thing that we see from rookie wide receivers is that we don't see rookie wide receivers tend to do much in the NFL their first year. And we had this debate on my group chat with my main fantasy league, is that a guy posed the question of what receiver or what player do you think, he listed Trevor Lawrence, like what rookie is going to be fantasy relevant this year. He listed Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Najee Harris, Jamar Chase, and Kyle Pitts. And honestly, like, when someone had answered the question saying he thinks Jamar Chase will be the guy who's going to be mostly the most fantasy relevant player this year from a rookie standpoint. And I tend to agree with that. I know Chase he was sitting out last year because of COVID, but if you look at the talent that he is, you look at what, and he said that he thinks that Jamar Chase will feast, like quote unquote feast this year. And I feel like define feast, because when we look at the track record of rookie wide receivers, we don't tend to see a lot of productive wide receivers because it's just not there. I mean, we had 1 year, Michael Thomas was the only rookie that did. He was a wide receiver 7. He's the only guy that year of the rookie wide receivers that did anything. Then you had Juju when he was a rookie. He was the overall PPR leagues, he was a wide receiver 23. So like he was the only rookie that really did anything that 1 year. And then you had AJ Brown. He was like, I believe, the 21st wide receiver, like rookie wide receiver that overall finished. So we don't see it a lot. So, if we see Justin Jefferson as a rookie and we've compared him what Jamar Chase can be, there's opportunity there, right? Because the Cincinnati Bengals have 195 targets vacant for this year, and so that has to be spread against Jamar Chase. There's T Higgins, and there's going to be Tyler Boyd. So then you also have to add Joe Mixon into play because he's a pass catching running back. So I do think like the topic of what rookie could do well, I believe in Jamar Chase because of the opportunity. I also think about Najee Harris too, because he's going to a team that is known to be very fantasy friendly for running backs, and he is a bell cow running back. He's a 3-down back. He won't have to be taken off the field because of the position he plays and the skill set that he has. So very interesting topic. So if you guys have a player that you think will do well in fantasy this year who's a rookie that you believe that could be that under the radar guy, leave a comment and let me know. But just very interesting to kind of see exactly a rookie in the top, in the top 10, almost in the top 5, because we don't see that very often, which is a very rare thing. So if you're a guy who is in a redraft league and thinks that drafting a rookie wide receiver is going to be, something that's going to save your roster, it may be a problem because you don't see it very often. But that's pretty much everything about, on today's episode about, what I wanted to talk about with the wide receiver position. I felt like, there's always going to be guys every year. There's going to be parity in the league every single year, right? You're going to see guys that are drafted super high that don't finish in the top 12 at all. I mean, Michael Thomas was the number 1 wide receiver taken. He didn't even finish because he didn't play this year because he was injured all the time. So that's what I'm saying is that you see guys that, and Kenny Galladay's another player. You just don't see these players that get drafted high maintain that status. I mean, you got Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Chris Godwin, Kenny Galladay, DJ Moore, OBJ, Juju, all these guys finished outside the top 12, and that just happened. So it's just something always to kind of look at and really see the consistency of these players throughout the seasons that they played. Like how often do they finish at the wide receiver 1, and then generally kind of gravitate towards that. And you're always going to have players that are going to break out every year, but sometimes it's a hit and miss. So, but that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, please shoot me an email at chip@gridironfantasyfootball.com, or if you want to send me a direct message on Instagram, you can find us there at Gridiron Fantasy Football, or we're on Twitter and Facebook at the Gridiron Pod. So next week I'll talk about the tight end position and how it started, how it ended with the tight end position. But like I said, I hope that you're, during the draft weekend that you guys got your teams that you root for. You got some great players that you're excited about. But until then, we'll see you next week. And take care.
No sleep, no rest. Might crash, might wreck. But first I tell them run it. 9 out of 10 roll through my hands, I'm by my lonely. Turn to a savage, now my baby wants to hold me. I love my fans, don't need no friends, I got my homies. Thought I could trust you, I find out you tried to zone me. I'm number 1 up on that court, I'm Nick McGrady.